On this video, we're going to be looking at some of the aspects of stock control. We're going to be looking at the stock control diagram that shows about 5 or 6 different things on one diagram, and the disadvantages of holding either too high or too low levels of stock. If we look at an example, let's say that you're a jean manufacturer, someone like, say, Levi Strauss, and you've got to get together all the bits and pieces to make a pair of jeans, just one pair of jeans. Well, you need some denim. Denim originally came from France, a place called Nîmes. You're going to need cotton, you're going to need dye, you're going to need rivets, you're going to need zips, you're going to need buttons, you're going to need belt loops. On average, every pair of jeans has 10 different pieces. And some of those pieces can come from a whole range of different countries in the world. So here you can see denim from Germany, zinc from Australia, brass teeth for the zip from Japan, etc., etc. And the issue is that you have got to have them all on hand at exactly the right moment for you to make that pair of jeans. If you haven't got an item, you cannot make that pair of jeans. So what do we need to know about stock? Well, really 3 things. First of all, firms need to hold stock to fill the difference between output and demand. Think about someone like a fireworks manufacturer. They're going to be producing fireworks throughout the year. So their stock levels are going to be increasing, and those stock levels are then going to rapidly diminish in the run-up in the UK to fireworks night. So it's really important that those stocks are there in the run-up to that particular occasion. The second thing about stock is that it is a liquid asset, but it is the least liquid of the liquid assets. Think about those liquidity ratios. You've got the current ratio, current assets divided by current liabilities, but you've got the acid test ratio, current assets minus stock divided by current liabilities. Now remember, liquidity means the ability to turn something into cash. So if we look at the current assets, one is cash. The second one is debtors. Or receivables. Now, if you were given a book by your school or college at the beginning of the year, and that book was a new book, there's a fair chance that when you received it, the college hadn't actually paid for that book. They bought it on credit. But within about a month, they would have paid it, so the book manufacturers would have received the money. So with debtors, they are going to get the money. It's going to be turned into cash pretty quickly. But stock depends upon a customer buying the item, and a customer might not want the item. So you couldn't say, if the tax man comes along and says you need to pay us our tax, you couldn't turn around and say, well, would you like this chunk of fireworks instead? Because they'd tell you where to go. The third thing we need to know about stock is it can be held in 3 different forms. Again, think about that fireworks manufacturer. They're going to have some raw materials. So they're going to have some gunpowder, some cardboard. They're going to have some sticks for the rockets or whatever. Some of the stock is going to be work in progress, where they're halfway through making the firework, and some is going to be the finished box of fireworks that hasn't been sold yet. So there are 3 different ways that stock can be held. So what determines how many stocks you wish to hold? Well, the top 2 factors there are internal things. They're things that would change from firm to firm. So if the firm is a risk-averse company, in other words, they don't want the situation to arise where a customer is unsatisfied, then they're going to hold higher levels of stock. Similarly, if they want to be able to respond quickly to a change, they're going to want to hold higher levels of stock. They're going to be less concerned with the fact that those assets are being tied up in stock. Down the bottom, we're looking at factors that are essentially to do with the product. So if we are selling something that changes quickly, for example, we're selling fashion clothes, we don't want to be holding on to high levels of stock because we don't want last year's fashions in stock. Similarly, the nature of the product. If, say, we're selling furniture, that's something that is durable. So it really doesn't matter if we hold it for a couple of months, other than the fact that we're tying money in stock. If, say, we're Tesco Tesco and we are selling fresh strawberries, different matter, because fresh strawberries quite quickly become mush. So we don't want high levels of stocks of fresh strawberries. So let's look at the classic stock control diagram. We start by looking at the maximum stock level, which will probably be set just below the actual maximum that your factory can hold, primarily due to reasons that we looked at on capacity utilization. Similarly, there's a minimum desired stock level. In this particular case, let's say that on average we are selling 10 units a week. We might want to have what's called a buffer stock of a minimum of 2 weeks supply, just so if we get an increase in demand, or perhaps some of our supplies are held up for a bit, we've got a little bit of leeway there. So in our particular case, the maximum stock level is 120, the minimum stock level is 20, which means that when we place an order, we are going to place an order for 100 items to fill that particular gap. The stock will obviously run down as it's sold. In this particular case, it's running down by 10 items a week. Now, we know that goods are not going to be delivered instantaneously. There's what's called a lead time. In this particular case, let's assume the lead time is 3 weeks. So that's 3 weeks between placing the order and that order arriving. Well, our desired stock level for when that order arrives, the minimum stock level, is 20. So we would need to place the order 3 weeks before we are going to hit 20. So if we are selling 10 a week, our reorder level will be 3 weeks worth above the 20. So we will be ordering when our stock levels hit 50. Again, this could be done by a person, or typically these days it will be done by a computer in the manufacturer's system contacting the computer in the supplier's system. And here we can see that lead time. So we place the order in week 7 when our stock levels are 50, and hopefully the stock arrives in week 10 when the stock levels have gone down to our minimum level of 20. So in week 10, when that order arrives, our stock levels go up from 20 back up to 120. So then after week 10, of course, we're going to be selling our standard units. We're going to be selling 10 a week. And so the stock level is going to go down until once again we hit the reorder level of 50. And it will then take another 3 weeks for those orders to arrive. And again, our stock would then be replenished back up to 120. And that is the stock control diagram. So let's look at those buffer stocks, that level of 20. So why do we need a buffer stock? Well, buffer stocks are called just in case by some people. In other words, we hold them just in case someone wants to buy them, just in case we get a little bit of unexpected demand. So the first pro of holding buffer stocks is it lets us to meet that demand. We don't want a customer coming in and looking for our product and it's not available. It means that we can quickly respond to an increase in demand. We can just call upon those stocks. And of course, it means that production can continue with stock delivery problems. Let's imagine that in the case of that jean manufacturer, we are waiting for those zip bits from Japan. Well, if we've got a buffer stock of zip bits, then we don't have to shut up our entire production line. We can continue to produce those jeans. So what about the disadvantages? Well, the obvious disadvantage is the opportunity cost. We are tying up our liquid assets, our assets effectively, by holding stock. Those assets could be used for something perhaps more profitable for the business. And of course, if we've got stock, there are costs associated with holding stock. We've got to have the warehouse in the first place, or the stock space. That's going to cost us rent. We'll have to look after it. We need security guards. We need security on our warehouse. So that's going to add to it. And of course, we'll need to insure those stocks, perhaps in case of a fire or something like that. So there are costs involved with holding stock. And the last disadvantage is, of course, there's the risk of waste. Our stock might go out of date. Again, the obvious example would be our fresh strawberries, but not just fresh strawberries. There are other items that can go out of date. Perhaps there could be a change of taste or whatever. Our stock could get damaged. Perhaps it could be subject to fire damage or water damage, or other forms of damage. Or of course it could become obsolete. Again, think of those fashion clothes that when suddenly the fashions change, or alternatively those fireworks once we hit November the 6th, or those Valentine's cards once we hit February the 15th. So finally, let's just look at the implications of if we do it badly, if we do not control our stock well. Well, the obvious one is there could well be resource waste that we just looked at on the cons of buffer stocks. On the other side, if we hold too low levels of stock, we are going to be losing customers, losing potential customers. That could involve us in reputational damage. You don't want to be seen as the firm that doesn't supply what it says it's going to supply. It of course means that there could be underutilization of other resources if we run out of stock. So we may well be waiting for a stock delivery. Meanwhile, our labour and our machinery are sitting there doing nothing, and that could eventually lead to a loss of competitiveness, and that could eventually lead to an ending of this video.